All right, guys, let's settle down. Hey, settle down! This is a playoff-like atmosphere. There is a ton at stake right now, and all that we have done, all that we've worked for, all the tears, all the sweat, all of the late nights, all of the dirty diapers. Taylor, where you at?
Yes, sir.
What do you do when your kid throws a temper tantrum at HEB?
Give him what he wants so he'll shut up and stop bothering me.
Wrong! Shepherd their heart, not their behavior. Edwards, what do you do when the chores don't get done?
Just let my wife do it. It's faster.
Wrong! Promote personal responsibility and a Godward orientation.
It sounds difficult.
What? What are you going to do when you got a 26-year-old man-child in your basement, doesn't have a job, playing video games, taking up all your Netflix queue? Does that sound like a good plan? No, not now, Jerry, no. Williams!
Hang on. Yes, sir.
What do you do when your kid gives you lip?
You give them lip right back.
Wrong! Teach them to submit to authority.
Hey, you submit to authority, man.
Jerry, still not now. This right now, this is our house. This is your house. This is what you need. Jerry, now would be the time. All right, let's go. Let's get out here and let's go shepherd the heck fire out of these kids. Let's go.
Every child in this world comes in wanting to do things their own way and has very little regard for those around us. Now, you might say, well, that seems kind of dark, Jason. That seems kind of negative. Well, it's not meant to be, but part of understanding how to identify a problem and what steps you need to take is to first say, here is what the problem is. It's to call it out. And so the reality is kids aren't naturally born to put other people's wants, needs, and desires above their own. They're naturally born to say, I need this thing and I need it now. And a parent's failure to recognize during those stages of their lives, those moments in which they need to teach the child that can have some very deep ramifications on who they become as an adult. We have to take those moments. In fact, Henry Cloud said this with boundaries with kids. He's Dr. Henry Cloud. He said this. Not only does he want things his way, him being your child, not only does he want things his way, he wants people his way. He wants not only to make all the rules for himself, but also to dictate the lives, possessions, feelings, and freedoms of others. In short, he comes into the world thinking that others exist only for him, possessing no life of their own. And so if we're going to raise kids that understand and begin to realize that there are other people that they need to do life with and take into account their wants, needs, and desires, one of the things that we have to teach our kids starting at a young age and more so in the various stages of their lives is that we have to teach our kids that there are boundaries. They have to learn that there are boundaries in their life that they need to observe. But we need to stop long enough to say, hey man, what is a boundary? Well, a boundary is this. A boundary is a property line that defines a person. Boundaries define what is mine and what is not mine, and where I begin and where I end. And all sorts of problems happen in our lives when we don't observe boundaries, but even worse, when we invade somebody else's boundaries. And if you've ever lived with somebody that had boundary issues and didn't do a good job of understanding the boundaries of others, you know that that can be a very difficult person to do life with and to be around. And so it's important that we teach our kids from a very young age to learn and to respect healthy boundaries in their lives. And part of understanding boundaries is we have to know the things that I am responsible for. But here's the more important thing sometime about boundaries. I also need to know those things I'm not responsible for. It's both. It's knowing the things I'm responsible for, but also understanding there are things I'm not responsible for and things I need to stay out of sometimes, or I am infringing on somebody else's boundaries. And my point is, kids are lovely and they're wonderful. I have 3 and it's great. But kids are not born naturally understanding boundaries. it has to be taught. And it has to be taught by the parents, and they have to learn it in the home. That is our job as parents, is to teach them and help them understand boundaries. And understanding that's at various stages in their life. I mean, when a child is born, that first year of their life, they are 100% dependent on the parents, and particularly the mom, for every single thing. Everything in their life depends on us helping them out. They are hopeless without it. But as that child gets older, as they become more independent, as they have more responsibility, we have to back away from that some, and we have to help teach them about boundaries, and they have to learn what it means to be a contributing member of the family, but also a contributing member of their culture and the world around them. And when we start talking about what does it mean to be a contributing member of the family and the world around us, in the workplace, wherever it may be, what we're talking about now is maturity. We're talking about the reality that as parents, our goal is to help raise up mature adults in the end. Well, what's maturity then? Well, maturity is when we stop demanding that life meets our demands and we begin to meet the demands of life. See the difference there? It's when we move from demanding that life meets our demands and we begin to realize that there are demands in life that we have to meet as well too. When we get to that point, we have begun to mature. And that is a goal as parents, is for us to help our children mature in the various stages of their lives, ultimately becoming a mature adult in the end. So what is the goal then of parenting? Well, there's a lot of them, but one in particular we talked about last week, I kind of want to hit again. Last week we talked about that one of the big goals of parents is having the end in mind. In other words, understanding what the goal is. What kind of person do you want your child to become as an adult? We talked about putting a target up and throwing our darts at it. In other words, what are you throwing your darts at? What ultimately is the goal for your child? What picture do you have in mind as they become an adult? Have you as parents talked about that? Are you working towards that? Do you have the end in mind? And this can be hard because we said there's just the reality of what I call the tyranny of the urgent constantly facing us. There's always something competing for our time and attention. There's always the hurriedness of life. There's always things that say, right now, this is the most important thing. And so we get it. We get mixed up in the chaos and the busyness of life, but we have to be careful that we don't lose sight of the goal. And one goal of parenting is to keep our eye on the future. And this is hard because we exist to raise up our kids to be responsible adults. Now, where am I going with this? Where I'm going is this. It's easy when we're in the moment as a parent to just deal with this behavior, to deal with this problem, and to deal with this thing, and not necessarily have much thought about the future. But I'm hoping after we talk today, maybe we can pause just a little bit when our kids are walking through a difficult time or doing something that may be problematic or isn't healthy for them, that we pause long enough to think of some things. For instance, have you ever thought that when your child is being disrespectful to you and they're not showing you the respect you deserve, that this isn't just a problem right now, this is a future marriage problem as well? You ever thought that in the end, this could be a future marriage issue as well? Or when your kid won't do what you ask and they're not obeying and they're talking back, have you ever thought this is a future career and job problem that they may be facing as well? And so the point I'm making, when we keep the end in mind, when we realize that the future is something we have to keep our eyes on, we realize that this problem that we're dealing with right now isn't just about them not doing their homework or not taking the trash out or not emptying the dishwasher. It's bigger than that. This has to do with marital relations and job relations later on, because here's the biggest point you need to know, and I see this all the time as a pastor. Any unresolved issues in your childhood will make their way into your marriage and into your jobs. I just promise you. Any unfinished business, any childhood problems or dysfunctions that haven't been dealt with as the child, maybe you won't see it right away in the honeymoon period, but it will eventually make its way into your marriage and into your job. And so as parents, we have to realize this thing we're dealing with our kids right now, while we may be in the moment and while we may be thinking, hey, this is so important, I just need to deal with this behavior right now, it's actually bigger than that. This behavior they're exhibiting will make its way into their marriage and it will make its way into their careers. And it's our job as parents to keep the future in mind as we're engaging this behavior and realize that we're molding them to be mature adults that understand what healthy boundaries are in their life. It's a big difference. The Bible agrees with this, by the way. Proverbs 22:6, it says, train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it. So we have a responsibility as parents to train up our child in the way that they should go, so that when they are old, they will not stray from the path that's there. So when we're working through the issues of cleaning their room or taking out the garbage, this isn't just a room and a garbage problem. It's bigger than that. And ultimately what I'm saying is this has to do with developing in them and working through their character. Developing their character in life. That's another word that as parents we have a responsibility to engage. What does it mean for our child to have godly character? Because our character determines how we'll function in life. It is like a roadmap that sets the course, and it is our destiny before us. It determines our future oftentimes. So character is very important. And when I'm referring to character, what I'm referring to is this. Character has to do with a person's moral makeup, what is ethical, what is right, what is wrong, but also how they function in relationships and how they accomplish tasks. So when we're talking about someone's character, we're referring to what is their moral, ethical makeup, but more importantly, how do they function in relationships and do they get tasks done? Are they capable of doing what they have to do? Because what we learn is that people that have strong character and strong inner strength typically succeed in many areas of their lives. But the people who struggle with strong character and don't have strong inner strength oftentimes fail in many different ways in their lives. We have to watch that. And so a major goal of raising up our children is to help them develop godly character in their lives. A godly character that understands what healthy boundaries are. A godly character that respects those boundaries and the people around them. I want to talk real quick about 3 boundaries that I think are important for every child to have and learn in their life. There could be many more, but these were 3 that I think every child needs to learn, and as parents we need to engage in our kids' lives, and are important as foundational principles to help them become mature adults later on in life. As I kind of jump into the first one, though, I want to kind of tell a story. It's summertime, and at my house, we love to get pool passes at the local pool, and we enjoy that. They sit around the pool, they have a good time. So imagine maybe in a few weeks, my wife Christy, she comes to the 3 kids, and she says, hey kids, we're going to go to the pool today and have fun, and they get excited, and they're looking forward to it. But she says, but first, we've got some chores to do. We need to clean up the house, get it ready before we go out and have fun. And so clean your room, vacuum, do some of these things we need to do. And we need to have all that done by 2 o'clock so that we can go to the pool. And so everyone kind of goes their way to do their thing. And let's say 2 out of my 3 kids, they jump in, they get their chores done, they do what they need to do. But one of the 3 kind of lollygags around and has some fun and doesn't get their work done. 2 o'clock rolls around and my wife says, hey, it's time to go to the pool, but one of them did not get their work done. What do you do? What do you do, right? How do you engage that situation? Which gets us to our first boundary principle that I think is important for every child to understand and all parents need to know and hold to, and that is this. Our choices have consequences. Boundary number one that our kids have to know in our families, but are just good for you to know in your own life as well. Our choices have consequences in life. It's cause and effect. The Bible would call it reaping and sowing. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, it says, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." Science agrees with that. Newton's third law says for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. It's cause and effect. Our decisions, our choices matter. What we learn is that life really does have consequences. And they're not all bad. There's good consequences in life to the choices and the decisions we make, and there's bad consequences in life. Our job is to teach our children and put into them that life has consequences. They need to understand that. And what they need to know is this, that a healthy respect of consequences, and that's a big word. That word respect is something we've really got to put in our kids. A healthy respect of consequences keeps a child grounded in reality and points them in the right direction. Our job in helping to teach them this idea of cause and effect, and that our decisions and our choices have consequences. As parents, we have to kind of ride that tension between how much of this process do I manage and when, because kids are different at various stages of growing up. And as parents, we need to be able to recognize the stages they're in and apply the appropriate amount of responsibility and ability for them to learn that choices have consequences. That's one of our first roles. And so I kind of put it into an equation sometimes because I like math and most people don't, but I like math, and this helps me think through what that process looks like. As a loving parent, I need to teach my child first responsibility and provide them with the ability to exercise responsibility in their life. The next thing I need to provide for them is freedom. I need to give them that room, that space, to use that responsibility, make decisions, and work through it. But the other thing as a parent I realize that I have to manage are consequences. What this means is, as parents, we have to provide at various stages in their life real opportunities, genuine responsibility for our kids to be able to learn. And then we need to be able to back up and allow them the freedom to work through that responsibility and make decisions within it. Our job as parents, while they're underneath our roof, is to manage the consequences, to put the boundaries in and hold to those boundaries. Now, this is very important because there's a couple things we have to keep in mind that I think parents struggle with sometimes in this. The first thing we have to realize, it is not our job as parents to control our children and make them do what we want. That's something a lot of parents struggle with, but it is not our job to control our kids and make them do what they want. We need to provide them with very real opportunities at times to make decisions, even bad ones. This is where parents struggle sometimes, because it's our natural nature to want to go in and rescue, to protect. But if you think back on some of the biggest life lessons you've learned, did you learn them from doing things right or from doing them wrong sometimes? A lot of the ones I learned from doing it wrong. And why? Because I then had to wade through the consequences of them and work through it. And I learned in that process. As parents, this is a difficult thing for us to do, but we have to. What I'm saying is, you've got to be okay from time to time letting your kid suffer. You got to be okay with it. Now, I get it. That's within reason. We don't do that in a way where they hurt themselves or could be in danger of their lives. That's not what I'm talking about here. But I'm talking about providing real opportunities to give responsibility to your child so that they can make decisions and give them the freedom to make those decisions and allow them sometimes to fail. You have to have an environment where they can fail, and failure is something they can do. Why? Because we learn from it. But too many parents sometimes try to control everything in their kid's life, and this only creates anger later in life and even separation. What we have to do as parents is provide them with real opportunities. We have to allow them sometimes to make mistakes. And yes, at times our job then is to step in and provide the consequences so that they can learn. Sometimes we have to discipline as parents, and it's for their health. And we got to remember that part of parenting is tolerating and enduring your kids' absolute hatred for boundaries. And yes, I picked that word in particular. Kids do not like boundaries. It's our job to tolerate and hold the line on boundaries. And that's why we start talking about our roles, and understanding our roles as parents is so important. So when a parent tells me, I just want to be their friend, I have no idea how that would work. I mean, yes, I want to be cordial with my kids, and we have a great, strong relationship, but we can't always be friends. Because you know what my kid's primary role is in our house? My kid's primary role, like it or not, is to test my resolve. It is. They are naturally born to try to stretch their boundaries, to look for weaknesses on the boundaries, to see how far they can get and how much they can get away with. Any amens out there from parents? That's their role. Now we've got to understand then what our role is, and our role is to withstand the test, to hold our ground, to stand what is right, to not give in. And this includes times when they're angry or they're having tantrums or they're throwing a fit, whatever it may be. We got to stand our ground because they're going to test your resolve. That's just what kids do. And it gets to the next boundary lesson that we need to learn, and it goes along with this. Because if your child does not learn cause and effect, if they don't learn that their decisions that they make in life have consequences, the second boundary will be very difficult, because the second boundary says that they have to take responsibility for their actions. We have to learn in life that we take responsibility for our actions. In other words, more and more as kids grow up, they have to realize that their problems are their problems. They have to own them. They're not everybody else's problem. Your bad decisions, your bad choices, the things you've done are your problems, and you've got to own them. And we've got to raise kids that understand that. This is a big part of parenting, is understanding that we have to teach our kids to take responsibility for their actions more and more. And they don't get to blame other people and other things for the bad choices and bad decisions they have in life. As mature adults, we own it, we repent of it, we wipe the dust off, and we move on. But we have to teach our kids that. Again, we have to be careful about going in and rescuing them. We have to be careful about not allowing them the freedom to make bad decisions. All of these things go together. But when they do make good decisions, or when they do make bad decisions, we got to teach them, take responsibility for your decisions. Take responsibility for your actions. You have to own those things. And ultimately you say, well, what is it they need to be responsible for? And I say there's three primary things that all of us, but in particular, kids need to learn this, that they need to be responsible for. And the first one is their emotions. They need to be responsible for their emotions in life. And we're all going to experience emotions. It's what we do with them that is the deciding point, which gets us into the next thing. Then we have to be responsible for our attitudes. In this situation, in this thing, what is my posture going to be? What will my attitude be? Which ultimately results in our behavior. And they go in order. Because the reality is, in any given situation, the first thing we'll feel are some emotions, and then we have to decide, what am I going to do with these emotions? And that forms our attitude. And ultimately, the attitude we take in a particular situation will result in our behaviors. And so when you ask, what is it that we have to teach our kids more and more to take responsibility with, it's these three things. Our kids need to learn more and more how to be responsible with their emotions, their attitudes, and most importantly, their behaviors. How then shall I act in this given situation? As parents, that's what we have to teach our kids, because our attitudes drive our behavior. And what happens is if we don't teach our kids these three things, how to control their emotions, their attitudes, and their behaviors, as adults, this can result in a couple very problematic behaviors that are very difficult to get past in adulthood sometimes. The first one is it can end up with an adult who is entitled. The adult who's entitled because they don't take responsibility for anything, and it's really everybody else's problem. I'm just entitled to this thing. I don't have to have any responsibility for this at all. It's just mine. The second, though, more difficult behavior we run into when a kid doesn't learn to take responsibility for their actions and it makes its way into adulthood is they end up having a victim mentality. And that's one of the most difficult ones to deal with. If you've ever been around somebody with a victim mentality, you know how difficult it can be. Because a person with a victim mentality, they have the attitude that says, life is just happening to me. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can do to manage this situation. I'm just a victim. Woe is me. Anybody here ever know victims in their lives? Yeah. If we don't learn as children to take responsibility for our actions, we run the risk as adults of taking on a victim mentality. And this can be a very difficult one to overcome in adulthood. Because the problem is these behaviors that we don't deal with in childhood, we take into our adulthood. And the biggest problem with that is the stakes are higher. When we're adult, there's very real things that can occur that can hurt not only you, but the people around you in a bad way. So we've got to teach our kids, take responsibility for your actions. The third thing we need to teach, the third boundary for our kids they need to know is that power has limits. This is an important one. Power has limits. Now, when I was a kid, maybe around 8 or 9 years old, I remember I did something bad. Don't remember what it was, but I remember my parents disciplined me and grounded me, and I was so mad. I was so upset, and so I did what you should do in a situation like that. I packed up my clothes, and I got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I threw it in my backpack, and I got on my bike, and I left the house. I ran away. Why? Because I'm going to show you. Yeah? You'll miss me. Only about 2 hours later, as it's getting dark, you begin to realize I really do like having a roof over my head, and I really enjoy the meals from my parents, and there's safety and security behind the walls of this house that I cannot provide myself this evening. And as with any other child in that situation, I put my tail between my legs and I went home. Many of us maybe have walked through a story like that. And the truth is, at various times in a kid's life, they think that they're all grown up, they're strong, and they have no limits. And as parents, we have to teach them that there are limits in lives. That this is a gradual process. I mean, I think we've all learned that life does have limits. But we have to teach our kids that there's limits, there are boundaries, and those are healthy boundaries sometimes that are meant to protect us in many situations. Ultimately, as adults, we have to learn more and more not to control our situations and not control people around us. We have to deal with the reality that control in many ways is an illusion. And we have to understand that we are powerless. Now, that's a different thought for many different people, this idea that we are powerless, but it's an important thing that all of us need to learn. That control is an illusion, and our attempts to control the people and the things around us oftentimes only seems to make things worse and get people angrier around us. It doesn't accomplish ultimately in the end what we're trying to do. And what we learn over life with humility is that we are powerless to try to control and manipulate our circumstances and the people around us oftentimes in life. I thought this was interesting as I went through some articles this week, and it had a definition of mental health. That definition said that mental health is adapting to the reality of our powerlessness to control other people and the circumstances around us. I thought that was really great. But what was interesting was the other one. The mental illness definition was much shorter. The definition of mental illness is demanding that reality adapts to us. You see the difference? Mental health is realizing that we are powerless to control other people and the circumstances around us. But mental illness is demanding that reality adapts to us. It's putting us at the center where only God should be and expecting the world to revolve around us. A kid has to learn from a very young age that power comes with stewardship, that really, in the end, our abilities to try to control the people and the things around us takes us down dead-end roads of destruction and debris we don't want to go down. Mature people understand the things in their life that they have power over, but they, more importantly, understand the things that they don't. And they respect those boundaries and they stay away from them, because people that don't learn that power has limits and how to respect the boundaries of other people, they struggle in life greatly. They struggle in their relationships, they struggle in their jobs. There's a second reason, though, that learning and understanding that we are powerless in life is important, and why we need to teach that to our children. And that reason is because it's at the very core and basis of our understanding of who we are as Christians. Not only are you teaching them a life lesson that they need to understand, you're teaching them an understanding of who we are as Christians. We see that in Romans chapter 5, verse 6. It says, you see, at just the right time when we were still, what's that word, y'all? Powerless. Say it again. Powerless. Yeah. At just the right time when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. We've got to teach our kids that that's who we are. Because if a kid grows up without a proper understanding of control and power and is accustomed to manipulating others, when you have the idea that I can just do it myself, you have absolutely no need for God. There is no reason to have God in your life if we don't fully understand the powerlessness of who we are in our fallen nature, and how that the original sin of the garden was control anyways. I know what to do with this piece of fruit better than you do, God. I will be the master of my ship and the captain of my domain. It's the sin of the garden. And the more we understand that control is an illusion, and we grasp our powerlessness, the more we understand that we do have our power through God. And when we humbly bow before Him and rely on God for everything in our life, we can raise up a generation of children that bow on their knees and pray to that God. And every great movement of God that's ever occurred in time began with a group of people on their knees crying out to Him. We've got to teach our children the idea that power has limits, and they need to put their trust in God. Which gets us to our so what moment. I don't think this would be a huge surprise that the most important ingredient for helping our children learn boundaries is a parent who exercises healthy boundaries in their own life. A parent that demonstrates healthy boundaries in their own life. If you want to raise up a child that understands what healthy boundaries are and lives out those healthy boundaries in their lives, it starts with you. We have to model it, we have to demonstrate it, and we have to live it. Not just teach it, we got to show it in their lives. But boundaries are so important, and we are called to live lives of self-control and restraint. The Bible calls that the fruit of the spirits. Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and that last one, self-control. As adults, we're called to model self-control, maturity, and godly character to our kids, and then hold them to that standard in their life so that they become mature adults with godly character as well. And to do that, we have to learn some of the things we learned today, which starts with respecting others, realizing that you reap what you sow, that your choices have consequences in life, to take responsibility for our actions and realize that power has limits. That when we go outside of our boundaries and invade someone else's, that will come with consequences as well. And we need to be careful about leaving our boundaries, and we need to also be careful about invading other people's boundaries. Boundaries are there to protect us and help us have healthy relationships, to help us be fully contributing members of our families and the world around us. And so my biggest takeaway today as parents is you to really grab that concept of keeping the end in mind. This idea that when we're engaging this situation, we're engaging this thing, this behavior, whatever it may be, that it's not just this behavior I need to address. I need to think, what is the long-term effects and ramifications of this if it's left undealt with? What kind of adult will they become? And to understand as parents, it's our job when they test our resolve to hold the line, to keep to the standard, and to allow them to fail sometimes, but also it's our job to manage the consequences and to discipline them and to help them know that life has consequences. And I would much rather them learn that in the home than in the workplace or in their marriage when everything comes crumbling down around them. That's our job. Our job is to help them become adults, healthy adults, godly character, and to model that godly character. If we do that, we'll raise up a generation that will change the world through Jesus Christ. And that's our hope and our goal. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you so much for the opportunity to parent and the privilege we have, realizing sometimes parenting can be hard, can be difficult, and Lord, just remind us to keep the end in mind. Help us to love on our kids, but to also give them the space to take the responsibility we give them and make decisions, and may we then help them to deal with the consequences and teach them along the way so that they can be responsible, contributing adults. I pray that in all of us, Lord, if there's areas in our lives revealed to us that would help us be better adults with godly character, show us those things, Lord, so that we can model this to the next generation and they can go out and truly shine the light of Jesus to the world. In your holy and precious name, amen.